Welcome to the space where creators have aligned a positive and intellectual collab of open minds. For sharing and learning from one another, it's a vibe. Read the Rosa podcast on the mic. Subscribe, educator spitting bars. I guess you didn't know I'm multifaceted and humble, checking off life goals. The classroom is my comfort zone where I plant and sow seeds of knowledge, compassion, empathy, and hope. Reading is the key to unlocking your potential. Countless benefits, including cognitive and mental. Regardless of the genre, books are highly influential. Go get yours, I'll get mine. Making strides, monumental. Come rock with me and get down to this new jam. Reaching out to my friends, I had a very simple plan. Educate the masses through books and life lessons. It's the grand slam. I'm out. Tala Falava and welcome to the Reads with Rosa podcast. We have a very special guest on today's show. He is a comic book illustrator, a professional wrestler, and a member of the New Zealand esports team. As well as being an award-winning self-taught artist, he is a proud Duffy Books and Homes role model. From the 275, welcome to the show, Michel Mulipola, a.k.a. Bloody Samoan, a.k.a. Liger the Smashmouth Samoan. How are you?
Mahalo le soifua. I'm good. Thank you very much for the intro. Yeah, as you can see by my hearing holder at the maanga there, till I die, 275 for life. So, wherever I go, whatever I do, I'll always be carrying South Auckland on my shoulders.
Solid, man. That's so cool, bro. Thank you so much for coming through. I know you're a busy man. You got lots of things coming up. So I appreciate your time, to join us tonight for this talanoa. Before we start the interview, I usually like to give the guests, an opportunity just to kind of shout out their people, their villages, your hometown. You've already done that. Go ahead.
Right. I'm from the main streets of Maangere, born and raised, but my grandfather is from Lefanga, Mulipola from Lefanga, Iva and Manono. My grandmother's Vaimoso, the Solomonas and Vaimoso, Papasatoa, Faleasiu, and Sinamonga. So, yeah, those are my peeps.
Yep. So if you're out there, if you're listening, fam, this is what's up right now. So let's get straight into it. You are a self-taught artist, but I was curious, like, were you an art student? Like when you were at school, like were you an avid art student? Drawing all the time, hanging out in the art room, sketching, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, art's like drawing's just been something I've always done. Since I can remember, I just always loved drawing. And funny enough, I guess, when you're about 3-4 years old, right, that toddler age, all the kids just draw. That's just something that every kid does is draw. And then they kind of either grow out of it or they don't. And so kind of discovering comics around that same age, it just kind of unlocked my imagination and just kind of made me like love art even more and kind of become a focal point as I was growing up. And so as I was growing up, throughout all school, primary school, intermediate, high school, that's all I ever wanted to do was draw comics, drawing comics everywhere, anywhere, just drawing all the time, right? And I often tell like kids when I talk about my journey and my experiences, I often tell the kids I was that guy that was always drawing, drawing in art, drawing in maths, drawing in science, drawing in English, and obviously that leads to drawing in detention, but that was just something I always did. So like anyone that's known me throughout the school years knows that that's all I ever did. So like I catch up with friends and people from school like years later, and they're like, man, you're doing what you said you were gonna do. It's like, man, I don't know. I just had this like anchoring point growing up that I just wanted, that I could kind of focus towards and go, that's what I want to do. And I guess and somehow I managed to make that happen. So
yeah. But like in terms of honing your skills, right? Like because it's like you said, drawing every opportunity you could get, drawing on anything, as you teenage years and then into your 20s, like how were you honing your skills? What I mean is, like, were you taking classes? Were you watching videos and learning off there? Were you learning from books? Like, yeah.
So having a lifelong love of comics, every time I was reading comics and looking at comics, I was kind of studying comics, even though I didn't realize that, studying via osmosis. So, just kind of being enamored with that world. I was constantly just taking in all this visual information. And to be honest, what I wanted to learn, comics, wasn't being taught. It still kind of isn't being taught now because, there's no real kind of intensive kind of course here in Aotearoa that really teaches you comics. And so I kind of had to create my own journey in learning and discovering, because again, like, I didn't go to art school. I actually failed art in 7th form. But that's because it wasn't because I was a bad artist. It was more because I think as I finished my first board for my portfolio, I realized that my art teachers, as well intentioned and as awesome as they were, they couldn't really understand what I was trying to do in terms of comics. And so I kind of realized, why would I put all this energy into this portfolio to send off to Wellington to be marked by people who don't know me, don't know what I'm trying to achieve? And so I was like, man, I'm just going to muck around for the rest of the year after my one board. And I actually got, the reason why I failed is because I only submitted one board and I got 25%. So I got full marks for one board. But that was me kind of realizing that the journey I was on, the things I want to accomplish, I had to find my own way there. And so it was a lot of just making comics, really. Trial and error, just constantly making comics and making mistakes and failing constantly, and kind of learning from all of those mistakes and failures, and kind of just slowly just improving and getting more confident, and just getting stronger in my skills as an artist, just through reps, I guess, no grinding, as they say nowadays. And I'm too old to have had YouTube and when I was a teenager. So, again, the plethora of information that's available now, like, man, I would have probably developed so much faster in the internet age, because I'm a Samoan kid from South Auckland, and the first computer I got, like, that I owned, was a secondhand laptop when I was like 25. So, I didn't have the luxury of that technology and the information age to, help me develop faster. I kind of had to do it the old school way, the hard way. But I wouldn't kind of change that up for anything.
You know what? Because you also do work. You work with is it ReadNZ?
Yeah.
You do a lot of work in schools. You do school visits and you run workshops. And do you, when you share these stories with, with students, what are the reactions that you get? Like, just
Well, yeah. What's great about all the schools I visit, what's cool about it is that all the schools, primary and intermediate particularly, all of those schools have my work in their system, because I also illustrate New Zealand school journals. So every school I'll be talking about my work and I'll show some of the school journal stuff, and then I can see by the kids' reaction, they've read some of that, or they come across my work through there, and then they're like, whoa, so there becomes this, I guess, a bond, or like a new connection to that work now, because now they're like, yeah, that's the guy that came to our school. And so that's really awesome. And over the years, I think I've the estimate was probably about, I think I've visited about 24,000 kids across
oh my
around the
gosh.
country. In the last 6-7 years, I've been doing school visits. And like, from all the way up to like Kerry to down to Invercargill, I've visited quite a lot of places, and it's awesome. Like, for me as a kid growing up, who was doing something different, something unusual, something strange, something unpopular, kind of being able to kind of showcase where that belief in yourself can take you, and showing the kids the possibilities. They don't necessarily have to do what I do, but to let them know, but showing them and letting them know that it's okay to be weird and different, and chase impossible dreams, seemingly impossible dreams. Because, like, for me, I felt like I owed it to myself to give it my best shot. Because it's something I loved so dearly, and so much that, I just had to give it a go. And part of that is understanding that failure is a possible outcome. And but like being content with that, because I'd
Mm,
rather have taken that shot. As they say, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So
mm,
I'd rather take a shot and miss than not take a shot at all. And so yeah, so the kids stuff, like again, just it's one of my favorite things, and that's why I do so many like Duffy Books and Homes school.
mm,
I do the ReadNZ Riders in School stuff, as well as the storylines tours.
yeah.
And, each of those organizations has its advantages in terms of how I'm able to reach kids and share my experiences. Duffy Books and Homes, was the first one I was a part of, and I love it because it is the organization, that charity, is directed towards supplying free books for low decile schools, and a lot of the
Mm,
low decile schools in communities like Māngere, like South Auckland. So it's like, cool, there's a whole bunch of brown kids. I get to show brown kids what brown kids can do from South Auckland. And then with Riders in Schools, that allows me to kind of go all around the country,
mm,
and be booked and do workshops and stuff for all kinds of ranges from primary to high school. And with storylines, the thing I love about storylines tours is that it's localized in one particular area of Aotearoa. And so what's awesome about that is that all these schools that don't necessarily have opportunities to get visits,
mm,
uh, finally they get visits, and they're so appreciative. And so being able to reach those areas that are often overlooked, and whatnot, is one of the awesome things I love about those. So each organization has its advantages, and that's why I'm a big part of those organizations and support them, wholeheartedly, because for me it's the kids. It's about the kids.
mm. You know,
Um,
when
and-
you're when you go into those community, schools in your own community, do you feel some kind of way, like when you see these students, and do you see yourself, because they must be in awe, like, oh wow, we know South Auckland, so many amazing role models that come out of South Auckland, and then when they see you doing something that's so different but very cool,
yeah,
like, do you feel some kind of way, like, do you look at them and go, man, that was me, like, back
yeah.
in the
I
day?
think I didn't necessarily like. I feel privileged and
Mm,
honored to be in that position to share my story and share my experiences. um and like, for me, I think I always visit schools with the hope I can at
mm,
least inspire one child, like, because then it'll be worth it, to be
mm.
able to show them the possibilities. But yeah, like, I love being in South Auckland in terms of visiting schools there, because I'm just like, yo, I'm just down the road. It's like, what? Yeah, I'm just down the road. And like, I think one of the things that that really kind of blows the kids' minds is that, like, being a comic artist, that's like a cool thing anyway. But then
Mm,
because the way I kind of introduce myself and tell my story, I kind of load it firstly with comics, because comics is my first love. That's the thing I love the most. And so I
mm.
load it with all the comic stuff, and the kids are like, whoa. And then I slowly introduce the fact that I'm a pro wrestler, and then the kids
Yeah.
are like, what? And
You're
then I
like,
said,
this
oh yeah,
guy.
yeah. And then, oh, by the way, I'm a sponsored gamer, and it's sponsored by Logitech and stuff. And the
What?
kids are like, what? And then I showed them my setup, and like the kids just kind of like just sitting there like gobsmacked, like, what is this dude like? And I think one of those things I like to show them through my experiences, through my life and work, is like, you don't have to be one thing. You can be as
Mm,
many things as you can commit energy to. You don't kind of pigeonhole yourself, and possibilities are endless. And so again, I think I've realized as one of those things. So if you've heard any podcasts or see me stream or something, there's this thing
mm.
that my mates kind of joke about, where I go into sage mode when I kind of impart words of wisdom, which I pull out my ass. But one of the things I've realized is that the biggest risk I ever took was um, was trying to make comics a career, and
Mm,
because that paid off, everything, taking shots, giving something a chance, is kind of easy. Like, now that I've got the confidence that the biggest risk I ever took paid off,
mm.
let's try wrestling, see where that takes me. And then next thing you know, this year marks my 16th year as a professional wrestler. And
Oh
oh,
my
I'm pretty
gosh.
good at Tekken. Let's play. Let's go to tournaments and stuff, and let's do. Oh wow, I'm actually pretty good at this too. So it's very much, yeah, knowing that the biggest chance I took paid off means that
Mm.
taking
Well,
smaller risks and trying things, new things,
mm.
is just easy mode. Yeah,
Man, that's so inspirational. Well, then, since you let's talk about wrestling since we're there
yeah,
now. How did you become a wrestler? Like I get it now.
yeah,
You're driven. You're such a go getter. I love it. Right, such a vibe. But then wrestling. How did you get involved in that? Like
yeah,
Impact Pro Wrestling. Tell us about what's your origin story with wrestling?
yeah. So yeah, so it's funny that yeah, because honestly, I kind of laugh now because I'm go getter, a chronic overachiever, as one of my friends called me. Which is funny because I slacked a lot at school. I was just like, I guess I was just bored. Like nothing
Yeah.
interested me at school, but yeah, pro wrestling. I'm Samoan, of course. I love pro wrestling, um, but pro wrestling, my love of pro wrestling came through comics. So everything I've kind of done in my life, comics is kind of its origin. And so as a kid growing up, obviously I'm a lot older than kids nowadays. So when I was growing up, we didn't have Marvel films and the
Mm,
plethora of superhero movies, which I love. I go to those constantly whenever they release, but I didn't have that luxury of going to go see my favorite superhero as a movie as a kid. So I remember seeing pro wrestling on television, and it just blew my mind because it was the closest thing to real life superheroes that I had ever seen. And so, like the heroes, the villains, the spandex, the glistening muscle, good versus evil, the moral battles and stuff. And so that was just kind of like, this is superheroes. These are superheroes. This is the stuff I love. And so that's how I fell in love with wrestling, was just through my love of comics and superheroes, and just seeing something that in the real world kind of embodies the
mm,
the, the world of comics. And so yeah, so that lifelong, that love of comics and wrestling kind of became lifelong. Always loved wrestling. Once I discovered it. And then so I decided, it's like one of those things, when you love wrestling, you're always like, man, what would I be like if I was a wrestler, What if? And so I created the comic. And it was essentially kind of like, what would be like if I was a professional wrestling character,
mm.
and my wrestling persona. And the character's name was Kid Liger. Kid from Dynamite Kid and Liger from Jushin Thunder Liger, two of my favorite wrestlers. I was a big Japanese wrestling fan, so that
Mm.
was a character. And then I think, well, after I created the comic, I was like, man, it'd be funny if I could turn this character into a real life professional wrestler. And so I went to a tryout by Impact Pro Wrestling, and yeah, never looked back since.
Whoa.
Been part of the furniture since, for 16 years. And
Wow.
yeah, but yeah, it was just through comics. My love of comics, and then making a comic, and then just going, oh, let's see if I can turn this character into a real life pro wrestler. So yeah, that's where the character came from. And then after a couple of years of being a good guy, I was like, being a good guy sucks. It's so much more fun being a bad guy. So I quickly dropped the kid and just became Liger, which is
Mm.
half lion, half tiger, full Samoan. But yeah, so that's kind of how it got started in wrestling comics.
Hey, can you just quickly do the Liger voice for those who have no idea what we're going on about here?
The Liger voice. This is so weird. Actually,
Yeah, do you need to put your mask on or something?
yeah, I can do it when, but like it's weird that it's kind of like,
You're
yeah.
looking at yourself and like, nah, this isn't it, man.
Yeah, it's just like, my bare face is like, I have to hide behind the mask to do the voice properly.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, okay. Just in case you didn't know, my name is Liger. Half lion, half tiger, full Samoan. Choo!
Oh, bro, that was mean as. Oh man, that was
Um,
awesome. Man, that was so buzzy. I was wondering about New Zealand pro wrestling. Like, are there other Samoans? Are there others of us in
yeah,
in the same scene as you, or are you like waving the flag, or?
yeah. So yeah, over the years, I've been wrestling. There have been a couple of us Samoans around, and then like the last kind of 10 years, there'll be a couple of people that would come in and train, and then like, oh, awesome, these guys have great potential, and then they just kind of
Ah.
disappear. And so yeah, and then I think about 5-6 years ago, yeah, one of these guys, one of the Samoan guys came in to train, and he was just so gifted potential. I was like, oh, we got to keep this guy. And then so
Mm.
luckily he's been around since then, and he's been killing it. Like he's
Oh.
fulfilling the potential I saw in him. And as a elder statesman, Samoan elder statesman of the professional wrestling scene, it was one of the things that I wanted to kind of nurture. It's kind of like,
Mm.
okay, if we get some really talented, Pacifica people, I'm going to try and mentor them in some way, not necessarily
Mm.
full on hands on, but kind of just let them be at ease and understand that, I got their back. So yeah, so Jamie Tangatese is his name. He's absolutely amazing. And just this past weekend, I was wrestling one of his old schoolmates who works for New
Mm.
FM. And I trained him for 3.5 weeks, and he managed. He was a natural too, so I'm hoping he sticks
Wow.
around afterwards. Yeah, because I got to beat him up on Saturday, so that was good.
I think I saw a photo that you posted on Twitter. I was like,
Yeah,
wait, this is real. I didn't
it's
realize
just
this was real.
yeah, it's just yeah. From that first chop I gave him, his chest went purple, and I was like, "Oh, you got a soft chest, boy." So, but no, he did so well, and like so many people were surprised when I said, "Yeah, I only trained him for 3.5 weeks." Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and so again, like the hands-on kind of training with him, and again providing him with an environment, as well as some of the other wrestlers would come in and be like, "How long has he been training?" I'm like, "Oh, a couple of weeks." And they're like, "What?"
Wow.
So yeah, there are a few around the country, varying levels, but like Impact Pro Wrestling, there's definitely a couple of us, and there's
Mm.
one who's Kuki Airani and whatnot. So yeah, and then we have like Candy Lee, Samoan women's champion. She was former Samoan, former New Zealand women's champion. She's Samoan. So I think she's currently in the States doing some touring.
Wow.
So yeah, so when she came in as well, I was like, cool. Hopefully she sticks around. And yeah, she's pretty popular internationally, so I'm pretty happy
Wow.
with her as well. So yeah, there's a few of us, but there
Man.
wasn't the case a few years ago where those who would come in would just kind of not stick it out, because wrestling is pretty hard, and I think some people don't realize
Mm.
how intensive and how physically taxing pro wrestling training is. Not let alone the matches, the
Yeah,
training itself.
how do you do it? I mean,
Oh,
with everything else that you got going on, like where do you find the time to, do that training? Or because you've been in it for, 16 years now, you've got it, all sorted.
yeah, I guess a lot of it's muscle memory. I don't train as much as I used to,
Mm.
which is which I was like, oh, I wish I had the time to
Mm.
train more. Um, But yeah, I just kind of do it. But yeah, again, muscle memory and just experience really.
Mm.
Everything hurts, and I'm in the constant state of pain, usually dull pain and aches and stuff, because I am pretty old and I have been wrestling it for almost 20 years. So
Wow.
I'm not too sure how long I've got. I was like, oh, how many years can I do this? It's getting a little harder each time.
Mm.
And I feel it even more each time, but it's still a lot of fun. I'm
That's
still enjoying
awesome.
myself, still having fun. So while I'm still having fun and enjoying myself, I'll do it as best I can. But luckily,
Mm.
again, with experience, I know how to work matches without putting myself in too much pain. Um, I'll be like, "Hey, hey kid, you only get 3 bumps. I'm only bumping."
Oh.
Yeah, no, but yeah, I'm able to create stories without you know, risking my physical health.
Man, what does your family like? Man, do they always, they come and support the wrestling? Yeah. What, man? What did your parents think when you
Yeah,
first got into wrestling?
yeah. Well, I think well, the cool thing is my family's always been supportive. Like,
Mm.
again, they like, man, they see that this is all the stuff that I said I wanted to do. I've always interested in, and somehow it just turned it into a fairly successful career. Um, and so yeah, no, they're always proud of me, and and my cousins and stuff, and it's always like, oh, you're always a great role model for my kids and stuff, my nieces and nephews and stuff. I guess I guess like with the stuff I do at schools, it kind of shows them, how far passion and hard work can get you. Um, but my little brother, he likes watching me get my ass kicked. That's for sure. And my mom came to one. My mom only came to one wrestling event, and she just couldn't handle it because I guess she didn't want to see me getting hurt. But what made it worse was she was sitting in front row, and during the match, I went flying over the guardrail into the crowd, and I flipped over into the crowd, and I crashed and burned. And she comes running over and like starts pushing people over. She's like, like I was like, oh my god, my mom's like, coming over to check on me and just wrestling, and I think her coming over to check on me made it seem even more real that I got hurt.
Yeah.
I didn't get hurt. I was fine, but I was just telling her,
Oh.
I'm okay. Just go away.
Go away! You're ruining the plot. Like, go.
But what I didn't realize is that it looked even worse because when I flipped over, was like those really hard plastic chairs that are kind of one piece. The round, yeah. So what I didn't realize was that when I had flipped over into the crowd, I actually broke one of the chairs with my head.
Oh my gosh!
And so I think people really thought that like I was hurt. I didn't know. I didn't even feel that because I got a coke.
You were just in character, eh? You're like,
I was in character, the adrenaline, but I also have a coke in my head, so I didn't even feel hitting the chair with my head. I didn't realize I'd broken it until one of the fans after the show came over with this big piece of plastic. Goes, "Can you sign this for me?" I'm like, "What is it?" "Oh, it's the chair you broke with your head." I went, "Oh, I didn't even feel that." Okay, let me sign that. But I think the culmination of me breaking a chair, a solid plastic chair with my head, and my mum coming over made it kind of added to the fact that I was injured. So I was like, oh, that's cool. As long as the crowd thought that I was actually taken out, then it did its job. But yeah. It's so my mom, that was the one and only show she came to see.
Poor mum. I love it, eh? Just listening to you talk about it, could still hear it's cool to hear that you're still enjoying it, having fun, still hear the passion. I love it, man. Bloody Samoan. Why the name Bloody Samoan?
Yeah. So,
where does that come from?
Well, yeah, Bloody Samoan. The moniker that I kind of embrace and the brand I have as an artist and everything else I do, came about through the usual means, which is, hearing it as a child, hearing it as a young person, and the negative connotations that came with it. And I remember when I was sitting down thinking about what kind of brand I wanted to have as an artist, something memorable, because, to be honest, Michel Mulipola is a unique name. And a lot of people will struggle to spell it, right? Or like, how do I spell that? And well, I'll mispronounce my name and stuff, and I'll just be all over the place. So I was like, I needed something that was catchy and memorable, so I can use that as a brand, as marketing, I guess. And so as I was thinking, I've gone through a whole bunch of names, and then I settled on Bloody Samoan because I had created like this T-shirt. I did this comic about this family of Samoan luchadors, and it was like, and one of the comic strips I did was about Kongai, right? And so it's like extended family, and so I created all these different characters, and one of the characters was because it was like, what year was that? It was like early 2000s, so or mid, early 2000s. So the emo look was still quite the rage. My Chemical Romance. And so one of the characters I created was Emoan. And it was kind of like an emo looking Samoan kid. And I was like, oh, what kind of t-shirt would they wear? And then it's like, oh, Bloody Samoan, which was so because of the red of the Samoan flag, I created like this blood splatter, and then kind of version of the Samoan flag. And I was like, yeah, Bloody Samoan. That's awesome. And then I was like, that's actually kind of cool, and I could use that as my logo and as my brand, Bloody Samoan. And so in doing so, and embracing Bloody Samoan as my brand, as my moniker, as my pseudonym, I guess in a way. What I did was reclaim power of that term, and so I managed to take the negative and turn it into a positive, because now when people talk about Bloody Samoan, more often than not, they're talking about me and my work rather than using it as an insult. And it also kind of, is I guess a signifier of my sense of humor as well, where it's a little, it's a little on the on the risque side and stuff, and making fun of things that sometimes can be serious and stuff. So so that's kind of how it came about. Just one of the things that I just kind of turned and reclaimed power. So yeah.
Do you find yourself trying to, well, not trying, like being intentional with adding our Samoan language or our Samoan culture into some of the work that you do? Like, are you intentional as an artist in that kind of way, or is it just depending on what the project is? Or
Well, definitely, like, a lot of it is project based. And I have, as I've gotten older, and now that I guess I'm no longer in that, I guess, the early grind stage of my career, where I have created a body of work and I have a reputation and stuff. I guess now that I'm a little older, I also understand, I guess, my responsibility as a Samoan, tangata moana creator, to highlight not only the language and culture in my work, but just in general in life and politics and issues, social issues and stuff. But like, that wasn't always the case. But I also knew that every time I created something, there was not necessarily a part of my culture, but part of my community here in Māngere. I do know that when I was illustrating like crowd scenes and stuff, I was trying to reflect the community I hear, the multicultural community here in Māngere in South Auckland. I didn't want it just to be a whole bunch of white people. It was like, no, there's there's some Pacific Islanders, there's some Indians and Asians and stuff mixed up. Like that melting pot that I grew up in. I knew that I wanted to reflect that, because that's the world, that's the real world, not this whitewashed version that people are used to in media. And so I've always kind of had that. But as I got older, and I guess I connected more with really embracing being Samoan, I think I realized, I'm gonna do my best to kind of promote our people, whether they're Samoan or Tongan or whatnot, tangata moana, that's and being in the spaces that I'm in and the kind of unique position I'm in. I have to be that person. I have to be that champion, that voice in this industry, because there's barely anyone else in there.
I was going to ask. I was
Yeah,
so curious. Like,
yeah,
who else is there alongside yourself?
yeah. You Google Samoan comic artist, and it's just me for like, I think the first three pages of results. And it often does feel lonely. But in this industry, being Samoan and being one of the only ones doing this professionally and internationally, and there are some amazing Māori artists who create comics and stuff. And here in Aotearoa, there's a rise in female creators, which is awesome.
Wow.
But there's also a lot of Asian creators, or or a lot of Asian influence, like manga, anime style stuff, and so it's really interesting. There's a lot of people making comics, and there's a few tangata moana illustrators, who aren't necessarily doing comics, but are doing illustrative work professionally as well. So that's awesome to see. And it's weird, because I've been a published illustrator for about 18 years now. 18 years. And like some of these artists that I'm like, oh, because I'm always on the lookout. I'm always keeping my eye on Pacifica tangata moana illustrators, comic artists and whatnot, just because again I know what it's like to walk alone, right?
Mm.
And so it's like, okay, there does seem to be a few people, a lot of hobbyists, which is fine, that's cool, but like, I'm always just keeping an eye out and stuff. And some of the people I've reached out to, or I shared some of their work, somehow I had a real minor, tiny part in influencing them, which is cool. Like, I didn't even realize that, so it's cool to know that, my presence and my, I guess, my willingness to be out there, to be public, and kind of helped them along their own personal journeys. Because, as I said, like, understanding my lonely position, I kind of was like, well, if no one's gonna do it, then it's on me, right?
Right.
I have to be as visible as possible for those kids, for those young artists, to see themselves and understand, yeah, you can succeed in this area. You can be a professional artist. You can do all this cool stuff. You can travel the world, and so yeah, so it's really cool to kind of have that comeback and see some people kind of go, yeah, no, I remember you came to my school, or I remember seeing you drawing. I was like, oh wow, so yeah, so that those interactions again, I guess that's why another one of those driving forces as to why I visit so many schools is, again, making the change I wished I could, I had, being the person, being the change that I want to see in the world, being the person I wished I had growing up, that let me know it was okay to do this stuff.
What would you say to just some of our young people who are perhaps wanting to go down that path, like that pathway, become a comic book illustrator, or a published illustrator? What would they need to do? I know you're self-taught.
Yeah.
What would you say to them, like how to get started?
Yeah. Well, the tools to get your work out there is so much easier and accessible now with the internet. Like, you can just put your stuff out there for free. You don't have to worry about printing or publishing or anything. You can get your work out there and be seen by as many people, on the internet as you can. But at the same time, everyone else is doing it, right? So so it's a matter of kind of cutting through that noise. And like, in terms of the art and the work, like, I'm afraid to say there's no shortcuts. There's no magic trick to it. It's a grind. It's a lot of, it's a lot of, I guess, rote learning, just constantly drawing, constantly failing, constantly learning, constantly improving. And it sucks. It does. It's a lot of hard work, and it's not for everyone, and so people want the instant gratification, but unfortunately, being an artist, the journey is never ending. You just try to be as, like, for me, I just try to be better than I was the day before. Each time I create something, I'm trying to be better than I was before. And so, yeah, for those young ones who are wanting to pursue the arts, like, it sucks, but man, is it worth it? All the wet effort, all the work, all the grinding, all the all those mistakes and stuff. It's totally worth it, and because you realize how much you've grown. And some young, like, I get a lot of questions from young artists and stuff. Some of the ones I get include, how do I find my style, artistic style? And I often tell them, it's like, once when you draw, or when you create anything in general, you kind of have to explore your own mind in order to create something. And so the more you create, the more you get to understand yourself a little bit better, the more you'll find your voice as an artist. And so, at the moment, these young artists are still in that kind of early stages, where they have to just draw more, create more, get to know themselves a little bit better, and then something will click, and then they realize, this is my style. And at the moment, I guess, one of the drawbacks I've seen in terms of, manga, anime style stuff is that too many people are just trying to emulate that style.
Yeah.
And so it becomes empty facades, really, facsimiles of that style. And it's like, no, there's nothing you about it, and so that's kind of the early kind of emulation, copying stage of being an artist. There's nothing wrong with that. I used to copy and and art as well. But then I grew out of it once I got comfortable. But yeah, at the moment I just see a lot of copying and a lot of emulating, and it's like yeah, once you create more and do more, you'll grow out of that phase and whatnot. So yeah, but in terms of like success and stuff, like my personal mantra, I'm not sure I can say this on your podcast, is do the work and don't be a dick. That's it. That's it, really. There's no substitute for the work, and treating people well and being nice is like gets you a long way. Even if you're not the best at what you do, if people know they can work with you and they can trust you, you're more likely to get the job over someone who's the best artist but an absolute prick. So that's why I found it like, how you treat people and putting in the work is kind of the best way to succeed.
Has anyone ever tried to rip off your work? I mean, I was just thinking, like, in this day and age where people are trying to, like, anyone fight off your work, like, or try and,
So, a few years ago, I did like this Green Lantern image, and it went viral. And it went viral before, like, I guess virality was a thing on the internet. So, virality was like I guess in its early stages of the internet, and it was just everywhere. And then people were like, "Bro, someone took the artwork and turned it into a mouse pad, turned it into mugs and phone case covers and stuff." And I was like, oh, I just can't be bothered. Like like the energy, like I was like, I can't be bothered chasing that up and stuff. And that's just energy I don't need to divert away from the stuff I do love to do. I think the funniest interaction was, because of the style of the artwork I did was like unique, because it was interesting, because it was an experiment for me. It was an experimentation and simplification. So I pretty much kind of tried to, because of the colors of the Green Lantern characters, I was like, oh, I can really kind of filter it down to like blocks of shapes and color, without having to do the detail, and you can tell who it is. And so the way I presented the artwork and illustrated the artwork, a whole bunch of people were like, oh, this is awesome. That's cool. We can use this kind of style for different characters, different fandoms. And one person did a Sailor Moon one. And she, and I remember she posted on DeviantArt, and she tagged me saying, hey, I was inspired by this. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And then when I was in Seattle, she was actually in the artist alley, and I saw her print, with her Sailor Moon print, which was inspired by my Green Lantern one. And I was like, whoa, that's cool. Is that inspired by the Green Lantern artwork? And she was like, oh, no, I think we had the same idea around the same time. And I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't tell her who I was. I was just like, I just wanted to go, I wanted to kind of blast her. I was like, I was just hoping that she would like at least kind of acknowledge it. But she said, oh, no, I think we had the same idea. I was like, I remember your post. You posted you saw my artwork and you thought it'd be cool to, so I think that's the funny thing. But again, that stuff, it's energy that, as I said, I don't need to use, unless it's something major, like that Green Lantern thing. Like the truth of the matter is, it's fan art. I don't own those characters, so I'm not going to go around chasing people going, hey, you're stealing my artwork that I use intellectual property that doesn't belong to me. So again, that kind of stuff, I have had that happen. But again, energy I don't need to exert on stuff that doesn't matter to me.
And in regards to the whole chasing people and doing that thing, copyright and all that, do you have a team that kind of does admin and things like that for you, or are you like your one man gang kind of thing? You do everything.
Just me. I do all my accounting, I do all my marketing and stuff, and marketing and whatnot. It's just all me, really. Hopefully, someday I'll be able to actually have a studio, in terms of like a whole bunch of hopefully tangata moana artists working under me and create like something. But at the moment, I'm just kind of, it's just me.
Wow. Or maybe take on an apprentice or mentor someone. I mean, never know.
Yeah, that would be cool if I had the time. Like I'm
Yeah.
so busy working on so many different things that I was like, man, I just didn't have the time. To take on that kind of work. I have put out feelers in the past about like, hey, any aspiring, any Pacifica artists who want me to look at their work and give them some critiques and stuff to work on. Could do a couple of hours Zoom calls, and so I did that a
Mm.
couple of years ago, which was cool. Which was weird too because a lot of the artists that hit me up were from Australia.
Oh,
There weren't
wow.
many here in Aotearoa who hit me up on and put, who took up the offer. So I was like, hey. But yeah, but like I remember, I think a while ago, I think I said, hey, would you guys be interested? There's some interest in it. So I may do it again, but again, probably when I get back from the States, when I have a bit more free time. But
Man.
but like, I do want to kind of help, through my experience and through my work, some up and coming artists as well, to improve.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, when do you sleep? But then I just remembered this post I saw on Instagram with your bed and the whole setup and everything. And then I was just like, then asked that he does get sleep, but
Yeah.
I was thinking that, and then I remembered that photo. I was like, oh yeah,
Yeah. Well,
man,
yeah,
tell us
I
about
do.
your setup.
Yeah, I do sleep, but like not as much as I should. And usually about 3, 4 a.m. is when I go to sleep, and then I wake up
Hey.
about midday or something.
Mm,
But yeah, my setup and stuff. Like you can see
mm.
on this side, but like what you don't see is like my 4 monitors and my
Ooh.
PC and stuff, my PS5 and whatnot. Like yeah, and like the great thing about having my desk transform into my bed is if I do need to take a power nap, I just kind of I can just do it.
Oi.
Um,
That is
all of that,
awesome.
yeah. But like this setup and stuff wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for COVID and lockdowns here in
Mm.
Aotearoa. Because the first lockdown in Aotearoa, which was about 6 weeks, I actually spent living in the comic store. um, and like because I just moved back home to Maangere, and then COVID hit, and then I spent one day in lockdown at home, and I was like, oh, I don't have the space or the privacy to do what I need to do for work over the next 6 weeks. And like because of my weird hours and the
Mm.
work I do, it would kind of annoy everyone else in the house. I was like, oh, so I hit up my mate and go, hey, do you mind if I live in the comic store during lockdown? And he was like, yeah, dude, that'll be great because at least there'll be some security and stuff, and the store will be used, instead of just sitting there vacant over the 6 weeks. And so setting up in the comic store, because the comic store had like high speed fiber internet, and like and I was able to set up all my stuff, and kind of take over the comic store. Um, and we had like a bathroom and that, so it was really great. There was a laundromat next door. There was a dairy across the
Oi.
road. Pack and Save up the road was there as well, so I could do shopping, and there was parks nearby, so I could walk around and chill. So it ended up being like the best place
Mm.
to hold up, and being surrounded by all the stuff I loved, the comic and all those characters, and then like all the necessities I needed to do my work. I was actually pretty productive in that first lockdown. Was amazing. So when I went back home and lockdown had finished, I was like, oh, I missed that space.
Mm.
Damn it. So I think I have to make that space at home. And luckily, I was supposed to travel America a couple of times in 2020. And and traveling to America. So when people see me traveling, every time I travel, that's me paying for myself. Like
Mm.
I don't get funding. Crave New Zealand barely
Roses.
do anything for me. Like everything I do is self-funded. Um,
Wow.
and so the money I would have spent going to like San Diego and LA and Vegas and then like New York in October of 2020, like I had planned, I ended up spending on the studio space.
Mm.
And so I essentially kind of was like, okay, the money I would have spent traveling, I could spend and create a space that, will make me more money in the future.
Mm.
And then I can travel fine later. And so, yeah, so essentially living in the comic store and then having the funds that would have been spent on travel allowed me to create this space, this amazing space. And again, like, I'm surrounded by all the stuff I love, which has its own creative energy. So every time I wake up, I just want to do the stuff I love. And yeah, and I've been super productive, super productive, but also super procrastinating as well in this kind of space. But again, COVID, not being able to travel, just I guess because I'm a very chaotic person. I don't keep a schedule. I don't kind of go from this time to this time. That's when I draw. That's when I work, and then from this time to this time, blah blah. It's like, nah, I just do stuff when I feel like it. And it does piss off a lot of people because I'm just like, I'm very carefree. I'm very lackadaisical, and so I think that ability to just kind of take things as they are and roll with the punches allowed me to turn a shitty situation like a lockdown and COVID and make it work for me. And so yeah, so I think that, and I think that chaotic energy is is part of my creativity. It's kind of going, okay, here's a problem, how can I solve it? And the great thing about creativity is problem solving without limits. So like in my mind, I'm like, okay, this doesn't work, or like this won't work in this time day and age, and or like during lockdowns and stuff. How can I make it work? And with that, working with that situation, rather and understanding that I'm not in control of everything, and what I can control, that's where I can do, that's what I can work with. But yeah, I do. I I just kind of chaotic energy. Really, I think is the best way to describe how my creative process. Is it like, let's just do this, and
It
then
works for some people.
yeah,
No judgments.
yeah, yeah. And so yeah, I think that's been really good. And I guess like because mental health is a big thing. And luckily for me, through my journey as an artist and stuff, getting to understand myself through creating, I think I have fairly good mental health. Obviously, I'm not perfect. I have my own issues outside of comic issues, but but I have noticed that I don't let things get to me as much in terms of anxiety is a lot of um I guess preconceived like outcomes. Like you're like, this is what I need to happen, and then when you kind of put those blinkers on, it could be out of your if something happens that you're not in control of, you kind of lose it. You're like, no, it's supposed to go like this. And again, having me have that kind of free form way of thinking and go, okay, let's just change tech and let's work with that. And it allows me, and so yeah, so anxiety and that stuff like it never really comes to play because I'm just kind of like, let's just see where this takes us, and it's go with the flow really. And again, it pisses off a lot of people. There are a few people, who are very much sticklers for but for me, like it's how I work. That's how I process things.
On that mental health, I ask this question to every guest that comes on, like this idea of self-care. Like, so when you're not doing the things that you love, the illustrating and when you're not visiting schools and just working on these different projects, what can we find you doing? Like, what are you doing other than like just aside from the gaming and everything else that goes on normally in your life?
Yeah, well,
Or is it there 365 days of the year?
it's like it's not necessarily 365 and then 24/7. But because I get to do what I love, like that's part of the self-care. It's like, man, understanding how fortunate I am to do what I love as a job, as a career, and be successful in it. So like, I never kind of take it for granted. Um, there's creative blocks, obviously, but like what's great about what I do and one of the things I've got my fingers in, or the pies I've got my fingers in, is that there's creativity involved in each one of them. And so if I feel like, I don't feel like drawing today, I may go to a training or I might have wrestling, and so I get to be creative in a different sense as a
Right.
right. But then if like I don't have wrestling or training, I'm like, oh, I'll play some video games, and so I can be creative in the way I play video games, and so it becomes this kind of perpetual engine of creativity. And then so if one of them kind of starts burning out, I'll swap it out with another form, and then I'll be creative in a different way. And then later on, when I switch it back, I've kind of refreshed myself, but I've still kept being creative. And so it's not like I shut myself away from my creativity. I use my creativity in so many different ways and so many different manners that it allows me to kind of switch it out and keep the engine running as smooth as possible. But like if it's not comics, wrestling, or video games, it's usually movies. Really, I've really enjoyed going back to the movies. Once lockdowns and stuff, and once we were able to, I was like, man, yeah, you never underestimate the power of sitting in the theater, enjoying. I mean, hopefully it's a good movie, enjoying a good movie and sitting there, experiencing it with other people, strangers and for people you're familiar with alike. So yeah, so I think that would be the thing. But because everything I do is like cool, it's like it's self-care plus career. So yeah, so it's one of those things. Just being grateful, being understanding the privilege I have, and just loving what I do means that everything I do is essentially self-care.
You're a professional gamer. I don't know if that's the correct term. Forgive me if it's incorrect. But yeah, like, what are some cool connections that you've made through gaming? Yeah.
Well, yeah. So like funnily enough, Tekken, the fighting game, it's my all-time favorite game. I've been playing since Tekken 1 and still play it now, Tekken 7.
Wow.
And I fell in love with Tekken because of wrestling, which
okay.
because when I was a kid at the fish and chip shop and I was playing Tekken 1, I picked the Tiger Mask guy. And like and as I was mashing the buttons, he did the suplex, and I was like, "Oh, he's a wrestler!" I was like, "This is a character." And so yeah, again, it's like this domino effect: comics into wrestling, and wrestling into Tekken. And then in the character's King, the pro wrestling character Luchador in the Tekken series, and I've used King ever since. And funny enough, I'm an old. I'm a veteran of the New Zealand Tekken scene.
Right.
I've been around the New Zealand Tekken scene in the arcade days for about almost 20 years.
Wow.
And so I have a bit of a reputation in the New Zealand scene. I've been around for so long, and I'm old enough that some of these guys call me uncle. It's like, oh. But I understand it's a term of endearment, so it's like, okay,
yeah.
There's a manner of respect in that term. So and so I've done tournaments and stuff. I went to Evo in Las Vegas in 2018, which is like the World Championships of fighting games. And I was there because I was like, what? Let's see how good you are. Let's give it again. Let's see. Let's just give it a go. And like I didn't even add any pressure to myself. I was like, just go out there, play well, and have fun. Like, and hopefully meet some people. Make friends. And so that week during Vegas, I somehow had hit like my stride. Like I hit form like in the right time, and I was beating people. Like I was like, oh, I'm actually good at this game internationally. And what was great about Evo, because everyone, all the best players from around the world come to Evo. I got to meet some of them, but then I actually ended up on the live stream for Evo. So, like there's bloody Samoan with the New Zealand flag taking on Batsu, one of Japan's best players, one of the world's best players. On the live stream with like 20,000 people watching around the world, and I actually played all right. I actually gave him a bit of a challenge. It wasn't hiding, and so people were like, "Whoa, who is this guy from New Zealand? This guy with a mask from New Zealand plays old school, like plays old school. So, he must be an OG, like." And what's funny is that bloody Samoan, right? Because that's kind of all across my social medias and stuff. So one of the people that was like, oh, this guy's fairly good. He's got a mask, and that's interesting. And he's from New Zealand, so I thought, oh yeah, let me just email him and just say, hey, you did a great job. It was good. I could tell you're old school. So he Googles bloody Samoan just to see if the information about me, and everything else pops up. He emails me, goes, hey, I was just emailing just to say, hey, well done, man. I can tell you're OG, you're old school. You're doing some old stuff and stuff. And I sort of Googled you just to email you, but now I find out you're a pro wrestler and a comic book artist. Like, dude, I've got to interview you. You're like the man. I was like, oh, okay, then cool. So my parents on the live stream ended up on like a big fighting game website. And it was like the interview was like 4,500 words.
Wow.
Because of all the stuff I've done. Like it was really hard to like kind of like really go. Well, just a small part. It's like all the stuff I've done in all of the arenas I've found myself in. Like I've found success in. Like it's like you could be like, hey, yeah, comics is my thing, and I wrestle as a hobby, and I play games as a hobby. It's like, oh yeah, I draw comics, and I'm a former New Zealand heavyweight champion, and oh yeah, to do really well in international at the world championships. So people are like, what? Yeah, it's just as I said, chronic overachiever. But that Evo 2018, I placed in the top 12% of players in the world that year, and I actually won a side tournament at Evo. So it was kind of like I was facing people from all around the world. And I was beating them, and then I ended up winning a gaming monitor, which is part of my setup. But
wow,
it was just one of those things where I was just like, I went there, no pressure. I just said I just wanted to play well, really, and I ended up playing out of my mind, and just doing really well, and then making so many awesome connections. And so now people know of me internationally. When I do my live streams, people like from America and Asia and the United Arab Emirates and stuff, Saudi Arabia and Europe, like they tune in. They're like, oh yeah, it's cool. Like what's some cool stuff? And then they want to see again, because it's not necessarily. I'm not concerned with being the best king player in the world. There's so many players that are way better than I am technically. But what I bring is my chaotic energy and my creativity. And so when people see me play, they're like, where's all this crazy stuff coming from? Like, how do you come and say, oh yeah, this was me just mucking around and just playing around with like, how can I use this move in this way? Just kind of thinking outside the box. It's kind of, this is how I've ended up with like an international reputation as a king player. And so now again, like anyone in New Zealand, Aotearoa, who plays King in Tekken, like I'm kind of seen as the final boss.
Oh,
and then like I have players in Australia who come to me for advice and stuff. So a whole bunch of the Australian players, kind of look up to me as well, and some of them call me uncle. So it's like it's really to kind of have that kind of reputation, but also that kind of success in that arena. And I was sponsored by HP Omen a few years ago, and I'm just finishing up my sponsorship with Logitech. So that's been fun, and I think all up, with the HP Omen stuff, I think they've hooked me up with about 10 grand's worth of computer gear for free, and then Logitech gear, I would say about 8K worth of gear for free as well. So I'm like, oh, awesome, that's cool,
man.
And the kids, when they ask me like, are you rich or are you famous? Like these are the things kids about. And it's like money and fame, those are the driving factors for what I do. The money I make like is decent enough. Like it's like, oh cool, I'm comfortable enough with the money I make. And so I'm happy with that. I'm happy that I get to do what I love and be comfortable enough to do what I do. And fame, like I don't care for fame. Fame is fickle. Fame is nothing. And so all the stuff that has come through, success and money and fame or notoriety or whatever, all of that are just byproducts of my passion for what I do. Like that's my love for the stuff is what drives me. Everything else is just a happy byproduct. And so, that's yeah, so that's why I'm always genuinely, just enjoying the moment and not taking it for granted.
For anyone listening or watching on YouTube, go to www.bloodysamoan.com. I mean, this guy here, he's being like, man, it's not just a few achievements. You got to scroll. You got to scroll hard. You're going to see all list on list on list of so many achievements. And bro, it's so cool. It's very inspirational. And so I wanted to ask you, what do you consider to be your biggest achievement? I know you've dropped gems all over the show, but
Yeah.
in terms of everything that's listed there, and I know there's still more to come, like your work is nowhere near finished.
Yeah, well, yeah, because obviously there's some goals I'd love to achieve.
Mm,
For some, especially with comics, some people who kind of go in with not a big understanding of this art form, they're like, "Oh, I want to draw for Marvel, I want to draw for DC,"
mm,
and creating that almost like like I understand the goal orientation, but sometimes if you really kind of narrowly focus that goal, you kind of again create the blinker situation where if it doesn't
mm,
happen, you almost feel like it wasn't worth it. And like even though Marvel and DC are on the list in terms of drawing comic stuff, like I have done trading cards for Marvel, and DC
mm.
Comics are interested in my work, so hopefully I can meet with them
Oh,
in San Diego next month. Um, Even though I haven't officially been able to like draw comic stuff for them, that is on the list, but it's not
mm,
the end goal. It's not the end game. I just love comics in general. I just wanted to draw comics. That was it. And so kind of having a nice broad kind of objective like that allows you to work within it so much more
mm,
freely than going, no, I'm just want to do Marvel and DC comics, and then that kind of again hamstrings yourself in terms of what you can achieve and what you can do. Um, but like just the ultimate goal was drawing comics and making money
mm,
from it. But in terms of the work I've done, you know, as an artist, to be honest, I hate everything I draw. But that's because I can see all the flaws and the mistakes I've made, right? And like I learn from those, but I still look at it going, oh man, I'm a so much better artist now because that's who
mm,
I am now. Like I've grown since those moments. So I don't necessarily look back at my stuff and kind of go, that was the best thing I've ever done. But there are some achievements that
mm,
I'm proud of. Obviously the work can be improved on, but the achievements I'm proud of was Headlock, the first Headlock, which was my
mm,
first graphic novel, and that was about 115 pages I
mm,
illustrated. And the reason why I'm proud of that is A, because it's my first graphic novel, and B, the longest comic story I had illustrated before that graphic novel was 12 pages. And so
whoa.
it's one of those things where it's like, can I do 115 pages? And I did. So I was like, awesome, I can do this. Like it was one of those things that I achieved that made me realize, yeah, I can make this happen. I can make this work. And the other one is the WWE comic. The first WWE comic I did
Mm,
was Samoa Joe, and that was special because the WWE comics that I illustrated were released all around the world. Those were
mm,
international. Um, and so just to know that my work and Mulipola, which was on the cover, was going to be seen in comic stores all around the world, I was like, okay, that's definitely a highlight of a career. But one of the main reason why I loved working on that was because Samoa Joe, the wrestler, is also a huge comic fan, and so
mm,
when he was asked about writing that story, he worked with my good friend Michael Kingston, and we all worked to get on Headlocked
mm,
before that. And so they suggested me as the artist. And so, and I ended up getting the job, which was great. So I got to draw Samoa Joe versus Roman Reigns. And so it was like
whoa.
Samoan on Samoan violence, written by a Samoan, illustrated by a Samoan. I was like, this would never, ever, like the chance of that happening again are like infinitesimal. So it was like, oh man, it was one of those things that was awesome to kind of illustrate these characters. And luckily for me, like the work I did in that story led me to do a few others for WWE because they love my work, and wanted me to do more. So yeah, I think those two were the ones that really stick out. I guess
Mm,
the other one. the other one that would also be really great, that was a great achievement, is the Aotearoa Samoa comics.
It!
Yeah.
I was waiting for you to talk about it. I was like, come on, rope him in.
Yeah, I think again it was one of those things, like part of my journey of being even prouder of being Samoan and learning my culture and my language a little bit better, and working with my Samoan language to create Aotearoa Samoa and the resources, the skills I acquired over the years, kind of lifted the project beyond, like, I guess what you'd usually see, because of my experience, because of my work, and the art form of comics is totally misunderstood by fair weather creators or just people starting out. And so I really wanted to showcase the medium and how it can be used effectively for these kind of resources. So yeah, Aotearoa Samoa, like, as a Samoan person, yeah, and I appreciate the support, and again, like, throughout that book, my responsibility as a tangata moana creator is, like, I wanted to showcase the diversity of our own people. And so if you take a look at the family, you'll notice that there's, like, different skin tones amongst the main family, because there's one thing I want to showcase as well, is that
Samoa family.
we come in different shades of brown, we different hair, and and whatnot. So that's stuff that maybe some people won't think about, but, like, that's what I actively think about, particularly with Pacifica stories. I'm very much trying to showcase our people in all of its beauty, rather than just just what people think it is. So yeah, those three projects would probably be the ones that I'm most proudest of.
Oh, that's so cool. In terms of book recommendations, I know you've done you've done book illustrations as well. Do you want to shout out, or do you have a favorite book that you'd like to recommend? Any work besides what you've already mentioned that you've done?
Yes, man, like, I love reading comics, but what sucks about making comics is that you don't necessarily have time to read many comics. It's like, oh man, it's like I'm too busy making comics to read comics. But one of the comics that I read recently that I loved was the DC Comics Pride 2022 special. And one of the things that I loved about it was it had a story by Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman in the Batman animated series. And it was essentially a autobiographical comic story about him growing up as a gay man and being Batman and stuff, and the the trials and tribulations of their existence, particularly growing up and seeing his friends die of AIDS and stuff, and kind of keeping it a secret that he was gay and stuff, and kind of. So it was like was just one of those things that, like, just very much, like, you're like, man, the best Batman is a gay man, and that's awesome. Like, but, like, just to see him tell his story in his own words, like, it was that much. It was moving. It was just like, oh man, like, just to understand his experience in his life, outside of the work that we know him as a voice actor. So yeah, so that's the thing that I think recently I was just like, oh, that's dope. Yeah.
Oh. So this I just, before we wrap up, I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming on the show, coming on the podcast, sharing your knowledge, as a comic illustrator, dropping so many gems and encouragement, sharing, some of your achievements. Like, that is so inspirational. I love following your tweets and your social media posts. Like, man, just keep inspiring, keep going strong. Love your work, love your vibe. I love your advocacy through your work. And it's so funny because ever since I asked you in the middle of the show to do that, your wrestling alter ego voice, I can't stop hearing it. I'm like, oh, there it goes again.
There'll be moments and I'll say something and it'll just kind of creep in a little bit.
Yeah, I'm like, hey, it's creeping in again. Stop it. Yeah. But yeah, bro, I'm humbled and so honored to have you on the show. So to wrap it up, I like to ask guests just to, final words of encouragement, final words, final quotes. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, I know it was my pleasure, and I'm honored to be asked to talk, to be here in Talanoa with you on your podcast. I've seen, who else you've asked in the past. I'm like, oh, that's cool, So, it was my turn. Yeah, no, I guess for me, I've already talked about doing the work and not being a dick, But I guess don't be afraid to push your limits, because all the best shit's just beyond your comfort zone. And yeah, just that's all I can really say. Really, is just do the work and don't be a dick.